Hey guys, welcome to another video. So this video is simply about how to read inputs and outputting on the screen. So we do this with a scanf function. Today we're going to learn about the scanf function. I'm going to just go over this program real simply, real quick, and then I'm going to go into depth on the scanf function. So we're going to start like we always do with the directive studio.h at this point, and then we're going to do the main function in main void. So here we're declaring an integer, a type integer, and the variable is called books. So we're assigning it no value whatsoever. So the reason we do this, it's practice, and plus we don't care what value it is when we're making this program. We care what value it is when it's running and it's telling the user how many books does he own. We only care about the number who's ever behind the program inputs. So the program is going to ask them, how many books do you own? And they're gonna insert their own amount, their own value. And what it's going to do, it's going to store it in books. And then we're going to print out books. So we're going to print out whatever value they inputted is going to print out in this printf function. So it's simple enough. The scanf function does look a little weird. We are introducing the address operator, so we'll talk about this in 1 second. So here's the scanf function. This is the prototype of the scanf function. So it's going to be scanf, just like printf. It's going to have quotation marks, and here this is for integer, doubles, floats, not characters. Characters is %s. We'll get to that later when we get to strings. So like in the previous section when we are declaring, I'm sorry, not declaring variables, when we want to print out a number of a variable, we use the %d for an integer, and we use the %f for a double or a float number. So we have to choose one depending on what type of variable we want. For example, if it was in books, we have the quotation, %d, and quotation marks out. And the second part right here is a variable that we want to store it in. This variable has to be declared before the scanf because we are allocating space for it. So that's why we have a declaration here. We need space to store the value the user is inputting. So that's why we declare it over here before. Because if in books was under this, the program would not know what to do with that number. There would be no space for it. And this ampersand sign, this is called the address operator. So what it's doing, it's looking for the address of memory. So it's going to that particular address in memory, and it's going to store this value at that address. So this is a concept with pointers that we'll get to later in the course, a little bit much later. It's much harder. We will look at it just a little bit right now because of the ampersand, the address operator. So what the scanf function does, it prompts the user to enter input while the program is running. It's updating the value when the program is running. It's not beforehand when you're coding it, it's when it's running. So the %d would be the placeholder for the int, and %f will be placeholder for double, just like over here. So like I said, the address operator locates the specified variable in memory and updates that value. And this is what it should look like in the scanf function. So it'd be the ampersand. Always have the ampersand. If you don't, this would come out with a warning, or it's just not correct. It'll print out something that you can't input that number. Alright, so this is a very small look into pointers and the ampersand sign. So what's happening here is there an integer variable called sum. Integer are 4 bytes, so it's going to have 4 blocks. All right. So in addresses, they're hexadecimal numbers. You don't really need to know that. I'm just giving you an example of what the address operator does. it finds these addresses and updates the value. For example, here, 000000FF, right here, these 4 blocks, that's the value of 255, but in hexadecimal number. Same for here. In age, this is short. It's just a smaller version of an int. So it's gonna have 2 bytes, so it's 2 blocks. So FFFFFF is -1. Same thing over here. Average, double is 8 bytes. It's larger. It can store larger numbers and it can store decimal numbers. So that's why there's 8 bytes, and this is the value of it in hexadecimal form. And this is the value in a decimal form right here. And later we'll get to pointers, but this is the concept of pointers. The concept of pointers is going to the address, the actual address in memory, and changing that value, replacing that value. So this is a program that would help us use the scanf function and printf function together. So what we're going to do first is we're going to declare the 4 variables that we want. We want the height, length, width, and volume. There's 2 ways to declare them. So we can just do the int for all 4 of them and do them all separately, or we can do int and do each variable separated by a comma. You don't need to do int, 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 int. You can just do it once and separate each variable by a comma. And then at the end of the last variable, do a semicolon. You can do whichever. I sometimes prefer just to do it like this, but that's just me. When there's too many variables, then I would do this. Alright, so we're going to look at the first one. The printf function here is asking us to enter the height of the box. So the purpose of the scanf function is to allow the user, while the program is running, you can answer the question of the height. And height is already declared up here. So there's a space in memory. There's 4 bytes in memory that allows us to put a value in there. And the scanf, of course, has the %d, since this is an integer. We have the address operator, and it points to height. So after you input the value there, it's going to now prompt the next question. It's going to ask you to enter the length of the box. So again, we have the length of the box already declared up here, and we're going to do just as the same, looking the same. It's going to be the %d since it's an integer type, and we're going to ampersand sign and length. Remember, the %d are quotation marks. Third is going to be exactly the same. We're going to enter the width of the box it's going to prompt us to, and we're going to have the scanf %d and the address operator at width. So the last part is we also have volume declared up here, and volume is going to equal length times width times height. And I want to stress to you guys that once a variable is declared, right? Once a variable is declared with the type and the variable type, you don't need to put the type again. For example, int volume is declared here. You do not need to put int volume. This is already declared, already has space in memory. You can just refer it to as its identifier name as volume. So then we're going to print this out, volume %t. So that's just going to show us the value of volume. And then we're going to return 0, and that's the end of our program. So now we're going to actually do some real programming. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you guys to actually answer the question. Okay, so this is going to be a practice. It's with the scanf function. So here's a question. You're going to declare 4 different variables, each of type int. Do not assign them values. The variables should be called A, B, C, and total. Using the printf function, ask the user to enter the values of each specific variable. The value does not matter because it's going to be entered during the program run. You can enter any value you want during the program. Just do not assign it a value. Do not hard code it into your code. So these numbers can be inputted using the scanf function that we talked about. This is scanf function practice, hint, %d, and whatever the variable name is with the address operator. After that's said and done, you're going to add A, B, C, and update the value of total. So you're only going to enter the values, enter the values of A, B, and C. Do not worry about inputting a value for total. That's going to be at the end. So total is going to be A plus B plus C. And then you're going to print out the value of total. So you guys can pause the video, take a second to look at it, and answer the question. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and answer it. If you guys had enough time to pause it and look it over. So like we always start with the directive. So it's going to be include studio.h. The main function, int main. Alright, so it's asking us to declare 4 different variables of type int. A, B, C, and total. And you can do it the other way if you want, like int A semicolon, int B semicolon. This is just an easier way that you don't have to keep putting int in. Okay, so using the printf function, ask the user to enter each value of the specific variable. So we're going to do a printf, enter the value of A. So we're going to scan that in with scanf. This is an integer type, so we're going to do %d. Close the quotation marks, comma, ampersand sign, or address operator, whichever you want to call it. And this is going to be A. And close those. Same thing with B. It's going to be the exact same thing. Enter the value of B. Alright. Remember, %d and then ampersand sign B. So this is posing the user 3 questions. They're asking to enter the value of each of these. Of C. I hope I'm not missing anything. I'm doing this pretty fast. Alright, so that's the second part. Third part, I mean. So the enter of the values of the A, B, and C are going to be done by the user. Alright, so we use the scanf function to prompt the user to enter these values. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add A, B, and C and update the value of total. Remember, total has already been declared as an integer number, so it does not need to have integer in front of it. So it's going to be total A plus B plus C. Closes semicolon. Remember, look at all these semicolons. That's what ends a line. And we're going to print the value of total. So we're going to printf the value of total. Let's do %d, comma, total. Close that out and return 0. So we're going to compile, run this, save it, and see what comes up. Alright, so it's asking us to enter the value of A. So let's say it's 13. Enter the value of B. It's going to be 18. Enter the value of C, 20. And the value of total is 51. So it's going to be 38, 51. There you go. So that's the basic use of the scanf function. This video was a little bit long, but the scanf function is very important to know. And I'm definitely going to do another example in another video, probably in the next video. And we're never going to stop using the scanf function or printf function. So make sure you know how to use them. So I hope to see you guys in the next video. I really appreciate you guys for tuning in, and thank you so much.